everybody. Welcome back, you players, playerettes, dudettes, amigos, everybody in between. This is episode 87. Episode 87.
Whoa.
Of Game of Crimes. Murph.
Who would have thought it?
Who would have thunk it?
You know, I tell you what, we're so grateful for all our listeners that you still come and listen to our silliness. But man, we do bring some fantastic guests on here.
Yeah, you players responsible. We have a new team on board, Audio Boom, and they are bringing us great partners. You're going to hear about some of our new sponsors of the show, like Manscaped and BetterHelp, HELP. So you guys make sure you get that right. BetterHelp and That's Manscaped. Right. So you're going to hear some of those ads. So we appreciate you guys listening in. Take advantage of those deals. But in the meantime, guys, thank you for joining us. Real quick housekeeping before we get started, because that's what the script says. Head on over to Apple and Spotify. There are these things called stars. 5 is good. If you guys, give us some feedback and give us some honest feedback. We've had some other stuff. Murph and I have, you can't call us names. You can't hurt our feelings, but we just really appreciate it. We put a lot of effort into this. And if you're only going to listen to 2 seconds and just give us a 1 star, come on, guys, help us out just a little bit. Mm-hmm. We're not begging for anything. We're just saying, give us a fair shot. That's all we're saying. Give us a fair shot, listen, and then leave a review. And we would really appreciate it. As I say in the South, appreciate it.
I understood that.
You said that.
I understood everything you just said.
That's right, son. That's right. Also, head on over to our website, gameofcrimespodcast.com, especially for this episode when we start talking about Michael Hearns and his Cade Taylor novels. You're going to see all the novels there and pictures of about $22 million in cash. So head on over to gameofcrimespodcast.com. Follow us on that thing they call social media at Game of Crimes on Twitter, Game of Crimes Podcast on Facebook and the Instagram. But I'm telling you, Murph, I'm telling you where you need to be. Well, we're both there. Is on patreon.com/Game of Crimes. We've had some great episodes. Like I said, we just finished up our epic 15-part 16 hours worth of the Real D8 Narcos on the Real D8 Narcos Cali edition. Murph, we've got you and JP's original edition, 12 hours, going deeper than anybody, boldly going where no man has gone before. That's what my
Chris Feistel.
That's what they said during my colonoscopy. Speaking of colonoscopy, episode 12, end of episode 12 on the Cali edition. Might have been.
If y'all heard that, let us know what you think about that. We'll pass it on to Chris.
We'll pass it on to Chris. But we do some stuff. We analyze 911 calls. We did the Alex Murdaugh 911 call in our 911 What's Your Emergency? So that's where you put on your listening ears. That's where you become an audio detective. And we determine, hey, is this truthful or deceptive? What can we learn from this? And there's been a lot of twists and turns on a lot of those calls. We've got great stuff on Patreon. We've got our Q&A, which is always the fun one. We're already loaded up for March. And I haven't even put out people telling them we need questions for March. So we are already loaded for bear, as they say.
Yes, sir. That's one of the funnest. There's a new word. That's one of the most fun things we do on Patreon is we haven't turned down a question yet.
No, we've had to divide some up. Thank you, Alex Hall.
That's kind of like a war and peace of questions.
Yeah, but hey, but that's, you know what? We appreciate that. Somebody takes like I say, with Patreon, you give us 2 things, time and money. We can replace money. We can't replace time. And when somebody goes to that effort, we answer every question. So thanks to all of you. Mm-hmm. So, but remember, this is a show about crime. We talk about bad people doing bad things and bad people doing bad things to good people. We take the story seriously, but
we don't take ourselves serious. And if you haven't heard us before, you're going to see what we're talking about here shortly.
That's right. So guess what time it is, Murph? Guess what time it is? Guess what time it is?
What time is it? It's time for
Small Town Police Blotter. Yay, and the crowd goes wild. Hey, I decided we had some feedback. I decided I would throw out a few strange laws coming to us from around the country and see what you think. Steve, did you know there is no drunk skiing allowed in Wyoming? State law holds that no person shall move uphill on any passenger tramway or use any ski slope or trail while such person's ability to do so is impaired by the consumption of alcohol or the use of any illicit controlled substance or other drug.
Yeah, well, I mean, you never know when there might be an elk or a moose or whatever's out there on the trail.
Or, Steve, there might be a Bigfoot. Bigfoot hunters beware. Skamania County, Washington passed a law in 1969 deeming the slaying of Bigfoot to be a felony and punishable by 5 years in prison. The law was later amended, designating Bigfoot also as an endangered species.
It's nice to know what takes priority out there, isn't it?
Hey, well, Steve, this is from your neck of the woods. According to the Tennessee Constitution, it's illegal to hold public office if a person does any of the following: fight a duel, or knowingly be the bearer of a challenge to fight a duel, or send or accept a challenge for that purpose, or be an aider or abettor in fighting a duel.
Well, there you go. Now you have it. Stop the dueling.
And Steve, what is one of the most annoying vermin out there that has wings and craps all over everything?
Oh, pigeons.
Pigeons can be annoying, but in North Dakota, you needed permission to exterminate one. State law holds that no person, firm, or corporation shall exterminate pigeons or other harmful wild birds without first having obtained a permit from the Fargo Health Department.
Yeah, I think that's true in a lot of places throughout the U.S., but still funny.
And Steve, Idaho. Most of us assume, Steve, you would think that eating fellow humans doesn't fly. However, though, in Idaho, it's clarified in the law. Though the law says it's a legitimate offense to have committed cannibalism under extreme life-threatening conditions as the only apparent means of survival.
Oh, I mean, they had to put that in I guess you do have to put that in the law. Cannibalism. Who would have thunk it?
Who would have thunk it? Hey, real quick, too, we're going to take a quick tour. Forest Grove, Oregon. Got some stuff from their police blotter. This is real stuff. Just happened recently. Population 26,258. Salute. February 10th, Steve. A caller reported a group of men loitering about in a local park, one of whom was relieving his bladder in the parking lot. The man explained to officers that the bathroom was in use and he really, really needed to go. Officers offered suggestions for more appropriate actions should a future situation arrive. That was February 10th, Steve, followed by February 11th. A caller reported residents in a neighborhood apartment were walking loudly.
Walking loudly.
Walking loudly. And guess what happened?
Tap shoes on, tapping on
tap shoes. Maybe they were, a little Gregory Hines action, skipping away there. February 13th, Steve, a caller reported they were experiencing injury on account of electricity coursing through their homes. Officers found no issues with the fuse box outlets or any other electrical apparatuses, nor did the caller show any visible signs of injury.
I got to tell you that one related story that when I was growing up, that at our church, there was a man who was a master electrician. And he worked for the local power company, and we were just sitting around one evening telling funny stories. And I said, what's the funniest thing you happened, with a power company? And he's like, well, people call in and they make all kinds of claims. And one lady called in and said, if you don't get out here and check my lines right now, I'm going to unscrew all the light bulbs and let the electricity pour out.
Teach us a lesson, why don't you? Well, Steve, that lady may have been this next one from February 16th. Officers were called to a local lounge where a woman was slumped over a video poker machine. She was fine medically, just intoxicated. Police were called to a residence where a man was reportedly unconscious and non-responsive. This is you. On contact, the man was just fine, just enjoying a very relaxing nap.
There you go.
And the final one, Steve, night shit. There's all sorts of shit that happens on the night shift.
There you go.
Working on the night shift. Night shift officers were called to check on a woman who was reportedly yelling at people for standing too close to her parked vehicle in an apartment complex. On arrival, the woman clarified she was not yelling at anyone in particular, but dispelling a spirit standing next to the car. No crime, and she agreed to quiet down.
Oh, Lord. Was her name Karen? Sorry.
And thus endeth the reading for today. Hey, but before we get into Game of Crimes, make sure you head on over to our Game of Crimes fan page run by our favorite mafia queen, Sandy Salvato. Yeah. Just answer a couple questions, guys. Just get close, get in the ballpark. Just even tell them your blood type. For this one this week, just tell them, hey, tell them what your blood type is. And if you don't know, say, I don't know my blood type. But just to answer a couple questions, if you're deemed worthy of entry, you'll head on over to the Inner Sanctum. A lot of good stuff happens there, a lot of good conversations. A lot of good memes are exchanged, and a lot of smack talking occurs.
It is. It's a fun website. You go on. I don't know if you call it a website, but anyway, it's a lot of fun in there. And if you go political or religious, or you do something that Sandy doesn't like, you will suffer the wrath.
You will go.
Good job, Sandy.
Gone. Just like, what is the color of your? What is your favorite color? Anyway, you have to understand Monty Python to get that one. Anyway, Steve. Speaking about Monty Python, which has no bearing to our next guest, other than they both their names start with M. Michael Hearns.
Yep.
This is unique. Usually we reach out, but Michael was so impressed by us, I guess. But he reached out to you, right?
Of course. He reached out to me on LinkedIn. He liked what he heard on the podcast. Michael has written 3 books, which you can find on our book page at gameofcrimes.com. Hearns.com. He is a little bit different in the fact that he got into narcotics at a very early age, and he worked in Coral Gables Police Department, which is right close to downtown Miami.
Yep.
I had the honor of pleasure of going down there and working some cases. It's a beautiful place. But the things that he got involved with is, I mean, Morgan, you already alluded to $22 million Caesar. Check out the pictures on our gameofcrimes.com and see him standing behind $22 million.
GameOfCrimesPodcast.com.
That's what
GameOfCrimesPodcast.com.
Yeah,
say it with me, Murph. GameOfCrimesPodcast.com.
Everybody, excuse me, man. I'm gonna give him some sign language here.
We don't want. If you go to Game of Crimes, I don't know where it's going to send you. You can go to eviliscoming.com. That'll also bring you back. Yeah, but this was unique too because he reached out to us.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, interesting stuff. There's Hollywood involved. There's a movie involved. There's 3 novels involved. $22 million in cash. Serial killers. But the only way they're going to find out about it, Murph, the only way they're going to hear it is if I ask you. Are you ready to play the biggest, baddest, most dangerous, Hollywood-friendly, the Cuban, Cade Taylor novel-friendly game of all, the Game of Crimes?
I don't know if I can do all that, but everybody get in, sit down, shut up, and hold on. Let's find out about Michael Hearns' career. It's pretty interesting.
Hey, guys. Another fascinating podcast episode is headed your way right now. And what we did is, I thought it was a little Fed-centric, so I tasked Murph. I said, Murph, find a real cop. Find somebody who did real work. And so we started looking at the state and local level, and we found this dude named Michael Hearns. Right, Murph? Did you find him? Did we find him? How did we find him?
Actually, Michael found us. He emailed me, or was it email or LinkedIn, Michael?
I used to be a detective, so I did find you guys. You popped up on my LinkedIn, and I was, and that's how I got introduced to you through your LinkedIn profile.
We do get a lot of people contacting us, and we vet everybody to see what their background looks like, and yours looked very suspicious. And we thought, well, hell, he'd be a great guy to have on the show. So we reached out to Michael.
A little dodgy, just perfect for us.
Yeah. Yes. I'm in a new marriage of a couple of years, and the adult children in the marriage always say all the time to my wife, he's shady. And I'm like, I'm not shady. This is just what I do. No, you have a guy on your phone named Black Bag Steve. How can you not be shady? I'm like, yeah.
Well, how do they know you have that Black Bag Steve on there?
Because they were talking one time about TV or something, and I said, you just have to have people who are black bag people. And they're like, well, what's that? I go, it's someone who goes in and does the things you need to do you can't do by yourself.
There you go. And it was, anyway, we reached out. It turns out Michael he has a very varied background. I think 27 years as a police officer in Coral Gables.
Yeah, 27 years, Coral Gables, Miami, Florida, 10 years detached to the DEA and U.S. Customs Service.
And you survive all that crap. And it's, and then he's going to tell us more. I don't want to give everything away now, but we do want to say
that would be good, Murph, because we're here to interview him, not you about him, because he's here. We can just ask him.
Well, see, this is what it sounds like when you're talking, Morgan, and I'm just sitting there taking a nap. So there's no payback.
That's why I have to talk, Murph. You're snoozing. I have to hit the mute button on you half the time.
But Michael, it is a true honor to have you on here. So thank you very much, brother.
Happy to be here. Happy to be here.
So we're going to take a journey here, and we're going to start off like we normally do, because there's some interesting things you got. We have a lot of people come on that have books. You've got some books slightly different, too. We've got some detective books we're going to talk about. Your new thriller series, Detective Cade Taylor, and we're going to see how much of that is actually biographical, loosely biographical, maybe not. And I know you're working on an anti-money laundering book. But before we get into all of that, Cosa Nostra, thing of ours. How'd you get started in this thing of ours? Were you out, skinny dipping in the, ocean one night and a couple cops arrested you and you say, hey, this is what I want to do? How did you get involved in this thing of ours?
I was a former soccer player. I was pretty fast. They were not going to catch me. How I got involved.
That's what they all say, Michael. You know that too. You're not going to catch me. Then they turn around and run into a tree, and you go, "Okay, Skippy."
Yeah, I actually got into this because my first love was aviation marketing and advertising. And coming out of college, I worked for one of the large major airlines, and then with deregulation and other downsizing in the industry, I needed and wanted a recession-proof job. So I applied at the city of Coral Gables, the city of Miami, and U.S. Customs Service TEA agent. I got accepted by all three. Don't ask me how. Don't ask me why. I chose Coral Gables. The SAC at the time of U.S. Customs, Pat O'Brien, he had a heart attack that I chose Coral Gables over Customs. But at the time, they were going to put me on a boat off of Vero Beach, and that's not where I wanted to be. So I went to work for Coral Gables, and
Hey, hold on. Before you get too far, let's rewind because there's always gold. You gloss over a lot of stuff, and we don't allow that. Let's roll back a little bit. I applied for all three, and then I did this stuff. What? So, first of all, where'd you go to college at?
I went to college at Southern Connecticut State University in New Haven, Connecticut. I'm not from Connecticut. I'm born and raised in Miami. They were a incredible and still have they have an incredible reputation as a soccer powerhouse. And I played in and lost 4 national championships with them. So I'm like the Buffalo Bills of college soccer. And did my time in New Haven, gun wave in New Haven.
Isn't there another college in New Haven? What's the name of that thing?
Quinnipiac. And then there's Sacred Heart, and then there's Albertus Magnus, and then there's I think there's Yale. I think Yale's there.
Yeah, one of those little small colleges. But Henry Lee has got his institute out there at the University of New Haven, right?
I did. I studied under Dr. Henry Lee, and I learned an incredible amount of curse words spending my time with him. And he's very knowledgeable, very funny, and we hit it off right away because of the New Haven connection. He does like to use profanity, though.
There's another famous person at New Haven. I don't know if he was there. I know he wasn't there when you were there. There's a guy named Bill Tafoya. He's a friend of mine. He was an FBI profiler. He's teaching cybersecurity now. I think he may have retired. He's the only FBI profiler that got the Unabomber profile correct. Out of all of them, he's the only one, and he ended up teaching at the University of New Haven. So,
yeah, well, Dr. Henry Lee, I joked about the profanity, but Dr. Henry Lee created incredible inroads for forensic investigations and for crime scene investigations. And he ran the the Connecticut State Crime Lab for years. He's not a slouch. He's definitely not a slouch. He definitely knows this stuff, and he's built a great program there at University of New Haven.
Now, but how did you end up at Connecticut? Are you from Connecticut? Where are you from that you arrived at Connecticut?
I was born and raised in Miami, and because of my soccer skills, I had some offers to play at different parts of the country. And because of the program was so solid for soccer, I went to Southern Connecticut State University. Didn't really give it much thought when it comes to living conditions, academics, alumni.
I was going to say packing. You probably didn't own a parka.
No, I froze the first year. I remember being cold in August, thinking there's no way I'm going to be able to make it through 4 years, but I did. Yeah.
Dang, that's why I said that's got to be culture shock. It's like the people from Australia, a buddy of mine, they would come over here and nobody had a winter coat. And he said, well, we just had the community coat, mate. You'd go down, there'd be a collection of coats. You pick one your size, you wear it, and then you bring it back when you're done. So
yeah, there was incredible cultural shock. I mean, like all the Gothic architecture, just the way people would refer to things, like a water fountain was a bubbler, a liquor store was a packy, a submarine sandwich was a grinder. And, when you talk about the community coats, that reminds me of in Key West. We used to have community cars in Key West where you just got in them and drove them and parked them and moved on. And so, the community situation works sometimes. But in my case, it was cold. It was different. It was difficult to get to New Haven. I had to fly in and out of New York a lot, take a lot of trains and buses and things. It wasn't a grind, but I got through it. I did it.
So what'd you graduate with a degree in?
I graduated with a degree in economics marketing and with a minor in psychology.
So you went to work. Yeah, you went to work in the airline, but I know you said you wanted to get into something that was recession proof, but was there a law enforcement or police bug in your ear before that? Or did that just arise because when you saw the deregulation and everything happen, you said, hey, I mean, like, did you get arrested one time in Connecticut and you go, hey, cuffs are cool? I don't know.
No, cuffs are cool. I never got arrested. My father was in law enforcement. My father was a chief of police, and my uncle was NYPD. But truthfully speaking, their influence was negligible. It was the mid 80s in Miami, and I had bounced between 3 different airlines. Every time I start to work for an airline, they would go under, or they'd get merged, or they'd get acquired by someone else. And I just got tired of, and it wasn't just me. I was watching other airline employees, get moved around, shuffled around, out of work, in of work. And I just didn't want that lifestyle. And I just looked for something I thought would be steady. I didn't have any aspirations as a young man to be in law enforcement. No.
So you're 0-4 in national championships and 0-3 in airlines.
Yeah.
Somebody hiring you's got to be going,
Yeah.
Oh, dude, if we hire him, we're going out of business.
Yeah.
Starting to see a track record emerge here.
I am what they call a big loser.
Right. So, so give us an idea too. Everybody knows where Miami is. Give us an idea where Coral Gables is at in relation to Miami.
Well, what a lot of people don't realize about Miami-Dade is that the county itself is bigger and larger than the state of Rhode Island, both in geography and in population. And the city of Miami is the largest municipality in Miami-Dade County, followed by other 26, 27 municipalities, one of them being Coral Gables, Miami Beach, Miami Springs, Miami Shores. So Coral Gables is literally centrally located. It's just south of the airport. Every major thoroughfare, if you're not on the expressway, goes through Coral Gables. And the University of Miami actually sits within the boundaries of the city of Coral Gables.
Wow. So, I mean, you get done, you get back there. Now, all these airlines you're working for, are they all located in and around like Miami Airport and stuff? Is that why you came back, or did you have to move other places?
No, I was in Miami.
Yeah, the Gables is it's a neat place down there. It's more like I think eclectic would probably be the right word to use to describe Coral Gables. It's a little bit of modern, it's a little bit of old, it's a little bit of Art Deco, it's a little bit of like a hodgepodge of everything. But that's what gives it the personality it has, and it's a beautiful place.
It is beautiful. The city's founder is George Merrick, and he had a vision for Coral Gables of having different ethnic-based communities. There's a Spanish section, there's a Chinese section, there's a Dutch section, there's a French section, and the architecture reflects all that. But traditionally, the cities are very deeply tropical foliage, lots of trees, lots of water. We had 40 miles of inland canals in Coral Gables. Jeez. And Steve knows from his time in Miami, the Coral Gables goes from Flagler Street all the way down to Coral Reef Drive. So that's 154 city blocks long. People don't recognize or realize how long Coral Gables is. They think it's just one street that they call Miracle Mile, where all the shopping is traditionally at. And they don't realize that the city sprawls. It kind of sprawls like an ice cream cone on a summer sidewalk. It just kind of goes in different directions. And it doesn't have any rhyme or reason in its streets. So unless you know what you're doing and you've really been versed in the geography, you will get in that town and you will get lost.
Well, not only that, but I can't imagine if you're getting into a pursuit. What jurisdiction are you in? Hell, I got no idea.
Pursuits were the best in the early days because you would get, like, the city of Miami would come across on our inner city radio, and you'd hear the guy go, "I just passed a big tree. I just went by a fountain. I don't know where I am. Give me a Gables guy." And all you hear is like, "I just passed a bus."
That's hilarious.
Yeah, I know. Hey, now let's kind of put a point in time for both you guys. Murph, when did you arrive in Miami? As I'm getting you right as a sip of coffee, or were you falling asleep again? They look both the same.
It's both. It's I'm using, this is one of my gifts from one of my kids. It's a powered, electrically heated coffee mug, so your coffee stays warm. It's pretty cool. I got there in November '87 and left in June '91.
So, did you overlap during that time, Michael?
We did.
What year did you come on Gables?
88.
Oh, yeah.
I was 88, and it's funny because, I mean, I don't want this. First of all, I have no say in the matter. I'm thinking you guys may not want this to be a name dropping podcast, but we know a lot of the same people.
Hey, look, don't worry. Yeah. The King and I love name droppers. Go ahead.
Well, I will say this to Steve. I tell people this all the time when I teach classes. I truthfully was raised, I was raised with money launderers and drug traffickers. And sometimes the road a man chooses to avoid his destiny, he finds, on that road. And there was a kid I grew up with who lived catty corner behind me. A super funny kid. We had I grew up on a street with 13 boys. Okay. We were like Lord of the Flies. Okay.
Yeah, you had your own gang there.
Oh man, it was rough. And I was dead smack in the middle, and everybody was very athletic, and everybody was always out here playing in the streets, swimming in the canals, causing commotion, And this one kid was pretty funny and great athlete, had a super good arm, great quarterback, great baseball pitcher. But he went to a different high school, so I kind of lost track of him. He was 2 years older than me, and that was Alex Dominguez. So
You're kidding.
Alex Dominguez and I grew up together and ran the streets together as kids. And then
we're going to have Alex on the show down the road. He is hilarious.
Oh God, is he hilarious? He's hilarious as you can't imagine.
Well, and so for those folks not inside baseball here, let everybody know real quick who Alex Dominguez is.
Well, Alex Dominguez is a retired DEA agent.
Yeah,
and Alex,
we worked together in SOD.
Alex had worked for a bank in Brickell, and it was an Italian bank, and he always wanted to go to Italy. So his big hope was to be the Italian liaison from the DEA to Italy. And then I get in this business, and a couple of years later, we go to do a deal together, and I look across the table, and there's Alex, and there's me, and we're like, oh, hey.
How about that? Small world.
Small world, man.
Now, I don't know if you know this, Michael, but Alex is trying, I haven't talked to him in a couple of years, but he was trying out being a stand-up comedian. And everybody that I've talked to that's gone to his show, they said he's as funny as he's ever been. You come out there with tears running down your cheeks.
He was, I mean, we were all funny as kids, but he was extremely funny. And it's funny, it's odd that you say that, because my brother was roommates with a very famous stand-up comic who's out there now doing quite well. And
well, you just can't drop it. Okay, give us the name.
My brother was roommates with Dennis Regan, who was a writer for King of Queens, and he's a stand-up comic. And his brother is Brian Regan. And Brian Regan is now one of the top comics in the U.S. So the four of us, before I got in law enforcement, would sit around the condominium or apartment and just bounce jokes off each other and stuff. And Brian is Brian's huge. He was David Letterman's favorite comic. Jerry Seinfeld's favorite comic is Brian. And Brian's clean, by the way. Everything is G-rated. There's not a single curse word in his routine, and he's revered.
It's funny you mentioned that. I find when we'll watch Netflix or stuff, I find myself gravitating to people who just keep it clean, like Nathan Bargatze, Jim Gaffigan.
Nathan's coming here where I live in a month and a half, so I've stopped watching him because I want to go see a show. Nathan is very funny too. But Brian Regan is the top comic in America right now, definitely.
Yeah. And he's from Tennessee, Steve.
From Tennessee.
Nathan Bargatze is Tennessee.
We're probably related.
I don't know. Murph's family tree looks like a ruler. There's no branches.
It's like a twig on a tree. It's one branch.
Sister wives.
Yeah. Well, that's the big question in Tennessee and West Virginia. If I divorce my wife, is she still my sister?
Yeah.
We'll get a legal opinion on that later.
And the answer is yes.
Yes. Hey, but so let's go back then to you get out of college, you work these things. Why did you said you didn't want to be on a boat, but why'd you pick Coral Gables? You said you applied for Customs, DEA, and Coral, and you were accepted all three.
I applied to the city of Miami, Coral Gables, and I took the Treasury Enforcement Agent test, which I don't know how it is now, but back then you went into a hiring pool of Secret Service, Customs, and IRS, and Customs pulled me out of the hat.
Hold on, Murph. I know you've got a story, but I have some breaking news. Everybody, hang on. Manscaped now sells beard products. That's right. They're once again revolutionizing men's grooming with the brand new Beard Hedger Pro Kit. From a beard trim to a fresh shave, the tech behind the Beard Hedger Pro Kit, it's going to make me look good, make my signature beard look good. You know how I look on TV? I'd tell you how I look on radio, but you don't see me on radio. Now you can finally use Manscaped products, Steve, to make the drapes match the carpeting by going to manscaped.com using code GOC for 20% off and free shipping. So guys, let's do it. Let's tame that mane. No one wants a weird beard. So say goodbye to all your stubble trouble with the Manscaped Pro Beard Kit.
And you know what? This comes with it's cordless, so you can take it right in the shower with you. It has a rotary wheel that gives you 20 hair cutting lengths, and this is the cool thing, all with one guard. You don't have to have all those extra accessories in your drawer. You can just get in there and take care of business. And on top of that, it's waterproof. So you take it right in the shower with you.
That's right. And look, this Pro Kit doesn't end there, folks. But wait, there's more. They've created 4 dermatologist-tested formulations for your post-trim care. You've got the beard shampoo and the conditioner. Remember, all your hair is different. Your beard hair is different from your hair. You got to take care of it that way. So they replace natural oils, they moisturize, and they promote beard health.
It doesn't stop there. Manscaped is also going to include the beard oil, an essential piece of your main facial accessory. Nobody wants a dry and brittle beard, right? We don't want you looking like that, Morgan. And on top of that, you know what? They're going to include the beard balm, a pomade that shapes, styles, moisturizes, and tames for that sculpted look.
And also, guys, remember the Pro Beard Kit comes with 3 free gifts: a beard brush, a comb, and scissors to ensure your beard is ready to impress. So get 20% off and free shipping with the code GOC at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com and use code GOC. Manscaped Beard Hedger. 1 stroke, 1 guard, 20 lengths. Okay, and now back to our regularly scheduled podcast. Murph, go ahead. I know you had something to add.
I took that same test. I was a city cop in West Virginia. I took that test, and several months later, I got a letter from the IRS that said, you don't meet our qualifications. And I thought, that's damn good, because I can't balance a checkbook.
Well, you need to hold on to that letter. Every time they ask you for taxes, just hold it up. I don't meet your qualifications.
Yeah, I didn't have that much foresight.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm kind of thinking with the IRS that they're so narrow-minded they can see through a keyhole with both eyes, as somebody told me one time. Yeah, they're not. They've got their own. They're a small nonprofit organization. So you picked Coral Gables. So when you got on, tell us a little bit too about Coral Gables City, like the size of the city, how big's the PD?
The PD now is about 230 sworn officers. When I got hired, it was about 140. And the big reason why that growth occurred in those 27 years is the city itself grew vertically. The city has its own skyline now, whereas it didn't have it when I was there. And the city grew because a lot of it grew because of the narcotic work we did. We brought in a lot of resources through the work we did, which expanded different specialized units and other things that we started to do. And then, Kalia comes along, and there's certification issues that need to be done. So there's a lot of growth there too.
No acronyms. Got to define all acronyms. Let people commission for the accreditation of law enforcement agencies.
Thanks, because I'm not a big fan. Thanks for saying that. Yeah.
Look, that's one thing. I mean, there's also, but see, Kalia also has another meaning. It's the communications assistance for law enforcement act. So one way it's accreditation, the other way it's lawful intercept.
Now this one was for accreditation. So that growth came. We had a lot of movement, and we also annexed larger parts of unincorporated Miami-Dade County into our jurisdiction too. So
what was it like when you got hired on? How many people did they hire?
How many people did they hire when they hired me? Is that what you're asking me?
How many were in your class?
In my class, my academy class had about 55 people in it, and of that 55, there were 4 of us from Coral Gables. The rest are from Miami, South Miami, Homestead, Miami Springs, North Miami, different municipalities in Miami-Dade County.
And obviously, like a regional academy, where was the academy at?
The academy back then was held at the Miami-Dade North Community College campus. Back then, there were 3 community colleges under one umbrella: Miami-Dade South, Miami-Dade North, and Miami-Dade Downtown. Now the academy, I do believe, is held out at Miami-Dade Police Headquarters. But back then, it was kind of out there.
And how long was it?
I don't remember. If I had to guess, I think it was about 16 weeks. It was about 4 months.
So when you applied and after you started getting into it, like you said, you hadn't really had a lot of influence. At what point did it click to say, yeah, this is what I wanted to do? Because I know you wanted something that was recession proof. Did it take getting out of the academy, or at what point during the academy did you go, yeah, I was built for this. This is me.
Truthfully, that never happened. I looked at it as a ritual. I was kind of like ahead of the curve on thinking. I thought that the city of Coral Gables invested a lot of time and money and effort into me. And there were a lot of veiled threats in the academy of like, we'll be here all night until you get this right. And I'd be in the back of my head going, no, we're not. They're not paying you overtime to be here. We're not going to be here all night. And they would say things like, you run to that fence and bring me back a blade of grass. And I would jog and they'd be like, I said run. And I'd stop. I'm sorry, sir. What? Run. Yes. Okay. And I knew that it was all kind of like ritualistic, and it's designed. I listened to the SWAT officer podcast you had from Los Angeles, and I listened to what he said about the academy. It's true. It's a weeding out process. They want to see if you can handle the stress, the aggravation, the commotion, the rigors early. And if you can't, they don't think you're going to make it on the street. So it's kind of a weeding out process.
And that's the place to do it. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. And I knew that. And so, I finished very high. I didn't finish at the top of my class academically, but I finished pretty high, and I finished pretty high in the fitness and pretty high in everything. And
how old were you when you entered the academy?
I was probably about 25 or 6, because I'd had the airline experience behind me. So I literally had some people my age. I had a couple of people older, and like you would literally be like 29 or 30, and you're like, God, that guy's an old man. And then we had like one kid in there who couldn't even afford to buy his own bullets because he was underage. He was only 19 or something. So it varied. The academy was great in the sense of a spirit de corps. You bonded. You understood that you had a common goal. The people in the academy, in my academy class, were all good people. It was very discerning when one of the instructors came in one day and looked at the 55 of us and said, one of you will not be here in 3 years. One of you will be dead. And we all kind of looked around at each other. At that point, you're like thinking, if this guy's true, if this guy's right, who is it? And true to form, one of us passed away 3 months after academy graduation. So,
line of duty or something else?
Duty, yeah.
Suicide.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's we'll talk about that later. We've talked to several people about that. That was even back in the 80s when I started 82. It was one of the taboo things. You never talked about it. It was the unwritten thing.
I saw a lot of it in my career. I really did.
Well, I like with a lot of us too. I've lost more friends to suicide than line of duty. So it's like. So let's get on to something a little happier. Let me ask you this: as soon as you got out of the academy, did the academy go out of business?
The academy did not go out of business, but the second I graduated in the city of Miami, and they weren't all Miami officers. One was a trooper.
He had a separate class with a special wrench that would take lug nuts off all tires. He had his own 5-gallon gas can.
He's trying to make a trooper joke, and leave the comedy to professionals, Murph, like Jim Gaffigan.
Of us three, let's see who was a trooper.
Well, I was just gonna say one was a trooper, and like 3 were city of Miami officers. They all got shot in the line of duty, like within like 2 weeks of my academy graduation. That was going on in Miami, so it was very, very eye-opening and very like, hey man, it's not a game. And I never thought of it as a game. Never looked at it as a game, not from day one. But the reality of going out on those scenes when your shoes are still shiny from the academy was eye-opening.
That's a call to reality also for rookies is, get me a senior partner and let me just soak up all the knowledge he has, because I want to survive this.
Yeah.
You come out there and you think you're some big stud, and the reality is you could go home in a body bag.
Well, we know that it was the heyday of a lot of stuff. I mean, Coke was coming in. I mean, it was starting to stiff. And so you were kind of getting in there during that time. That's the Miami Vice days. That's a lot of stuff going on. And I mean, that's I don't know how you would define what the heyday was, but definitely the 80s were like right smack dab in the middle of it, right?
Yeah, I mean, Miami has a history of smuggling and nefarious people. We can go back to Al Capone and his residence on Palm Island. South Florida as a whole was founded by people. Oftentimes, it's a drop off point of the United States, or as Homer Simpson says, it's the Wang of the United States. It is it's the last place. And And Steve knows from his time down there, it's flat and it's full of water. So it's ideal for boats and it's ideal to land airplanes. And it's just a great logistical geographical spot for Central and South American transport and import,
It was, I tell you what, man, it was, when I got there in 87, I was a fish out of water because I grew up in Tennessee and West Virginia, and I'd never seen anything like South Florida, and just fell in love with the place. That's why my wife and I, we retired to Florida. We just fell in love back in 87 and knew we'd always return here. Once it gets in your blood, man, you can't get away from it. And you're talking about the dangerousness of being law enforcement in South Florida. In '89, my partner Kevin Stevens, we were the inside arrest team on a buy bus for 17 keys of coke. It turned out to be a ripoff, and Kevin got hit twice in the gun battle, and our informant died. He was killed in that gun battle. It was a violent, unlike anything I'd ever seen in my life.
Yeah,
it was episode 5. If you guys want to go back and listen to that,
no, it really was. It was a violent time, especially if you were in the business. We oftentimes think like multiple people were being shot left and right, and that's not really the case. It's mostly people who are in the business that were the casualties of that drug war, either trying to enforce it or trying to stop it or being a part of it. The average Joe Schmo or someone else coming out of public supermarkets really was not in danger. It was the people that were in the business. But it was prolific. I mean, I don't want to gloss that over. It was a prolific time. And, people talk about Miami Vice, and Miami Vice is a classic case of art and life kind of melding together. Although a highly stylized version, yet nonetheless, a lot of truism there.
They kind of, we always joke a lot of the DEA guys when they get started about the same time as Murph, Miami Vice seemed to be an influence. But if you look at that show and look at what was really going on, like you say, highly stylized, but I think they did a pretty good job of capturing the danger, the type of things that were going on. And now the one thing I thought was accurate too, when people think, you look at what the bad guys are driving in their cars and all the toys and trinkets they have. I mean, that in a sense that hasn't changed, but back then that was just people were just buying. You got boats, you got airplanes, you got cars. I mean, you had all that stuff back then, didn't you?
Yeah, and we also didn't have the forfeiture seizure laws that were enacted due to that. So those type of luxury items were easy to come by, and they weren't. They definitely stood out having those things, but it was not uncommon for me to be a young man and go into Regine's or go into Ensign Bitters or some other club that's no longer in Miami and walk past 3 Ferraris, on the way in. It just was commonplace. And what happens is you become desensitized to that opulence because you're seeing it all the time everywhere. And it was almost like those people were trying to announce themselves as being in the drug trade. Via their jewelry, their cars, their boats, their penchant for extravagance, And it made Steve's job and my job a lot easier, to be honest with you.
It's kind of like a red sign over here. Hey, look, I'm the dope dealer. But it reminds me, too, I was pulling up the episode number 2, Steve, 23, Luis Navia. Yeah. Luis kind of did the opposite of that. He wanted to stay low-key. Luis was coming out of, what was it, Venezuela? 26 tons of coke. Yeah. They popped him on a ship, and it's like, but he actually said, look, he never carried a gun. He wanted to stay below that lifestyle because as things went on, it made him a target. And a lot of these guys that got hit, it was easy to target them. Why? Because you got no visible means of support. You're driving these, $200,000 car, living in a $5 million mansion, and partying and buying Cristal every night at the club.
Well, Steve will also tell you that the cartel, after a while, came out with a manual, and the manual told them, cut the grass, leave the house every day at 9, come back at 5. Don't have large barbecues. We actually, this manual will get passed around by many members of the cartel. And we actually stumbled upon one of them on one of our cases one time. And it was actually like a little handbook telling these guys, listen, don't call attention to yourself. Pretend like you have a regular job. Talk to the neighbors, but don't talk too much. Be friendly, but don't be, in their business. And go get the mail out of the mailbox, all that kind of stuff.
teaching them how to blend into the regular society.
Yeah.
It was, and the other thing was not only were they flashy, but, when you come out and you've got 3 or 4 or 5 pagers on your belt, and they like to show that off because we didn't have cell phones back then. Right that's right there is a target. Just follow him, see where he's going because he's doing drug deals.
Yeah, it sounds too like I keep throwing episodes. Yeah, it's our marketing. Episode 59, Michael Franzese. Murph and I met him down at the Southern California Gang Conference. Only guy, capo regime of the Colombo crime family that successfully lead the family and not get whacked. And one of the lessons from him, and that's one of the things he talked about, is they spent a lot of time telling their people, you're part of the community, blend in. I mean, so whether it's, drug trafficking organizations or organized crime, an easy way to target these guys were the ones that wanted the young ones that, hey, pay attention to me because now I got bling, now I got cash. And like you said, and the ones that really made it easy for it was the IRS because they'd show up. Mercy, you had your chance. You could have been IRS and walked up to these guys in Miami still and say, hey, can I see a receipt for that car? Where'd that money come from?
Yeah, I'll be the first to tell you I would never qualify for an IRS agent. I'm not smart enough. You got to know where your lane is,
Yeah.
Stay in your lane.
Yeah. So, Michael, let's talk about talking about staying in your lane. Everybody's got to start off too, and their lane is working patrol. You get out of the academy, you're working patrol. So, what's it like going from soccer in New Haven, Connecticut, and coming back now to where it's warm and you don't have to worry about wearing a parka? What's it like now hitting the streets in Coral Gables?
It was a tad bit surreal. But I had my route into law enforcement was not the same as most people's. I did 3 months of FTO training, field training officer. I had a senior officer with me for 3 months. Each one rotated after 30 days. I did 1 day in uniform, and then I got pulled into a street crime drug task force. And I did that for about 8 months, and then I went back to uniform for about 6 months, and then I went into vice intelligence narcotics. The reason being is that the department, I feel, certain members of the upper echelon of the brass tapped into the fact that I had a good working understanding of the drug culture and the drug world. I grew up with a lot of people who were in that business, as did Alex, and they kind of knew that I understood it pretty well. So they kind of tapped into that, and that's how I ended up going. Miami was having problems. Some of their officers were being burned, so they needed some fresh faces. I had a really good sergeant, and we put together a pretty good street crime task force and drug task force. And we worked crazy hours, and we were pretty effective. And that's how it kind of started for me. I did do some time in uniform, and I did, the back end of my career, I did uniform before I went behind the desk at the end of my career. But yeah, I kind of went from the academy almost into street narcotics in the blink of an eye.
So did that cause a lot of jealousy with the other new guys in the agency?
Incredible. I mean, it was like, yeah. I remember one lieutenant was railing at the chief that how come he's driving this type of car and I've been given this high end, sports type car. And my partner and I were the first people to have cell phones. No one else had them. But we were successful at what we were doing, and a lot of people didn't understand what we were doing. So it's hard to explain the nuances of what you're doing because it's not something you learn in the police academy. In the police academy, you're going to learn the elements of burglary. You're going to learn how to make a traffic stop, how to work a traffic accident. No one's going to teach you how to be a money launderer. No one's going to teach you how to buy cocaine. And if you had that knowledge behind you, and then you're able to, advance it through training, through work, through contacts, it puts you at a different level. I'm not going to say a higher level, it just puts you at a different level.
You got a different knowledge base than the other rookies coming in.
Yeah. I mean, I was in the police academy, and, it's like a weekend I'm off, I'm in my local bar, and this guy walks up to me and he says to me, "Hey, I heard you're going to be a cop. And, I know the guy's a doper, and I'm not going to deny it. It's just crazy to sit there and say no. And I said, yeah, I am. He goes, yeah, man, that's cool. That's good. I'm going to tell you something. And I think the guy's name is Ricardo Rico Ray. I'm not sure what his name was. I don't remember. But he goes, everyone is looking for Ricardo Rico Ray. He's in Quito, Ecuador. I saw him at a party. I'll tell you, let me get a piece of paper. I'll tell you the address. So I go back to the academy on Monday and I go, hey, listen, I don't know anything, but this guy told me. And then they had me in the police academy meeting a guy at Steve will know, a waterside restaurant called Monty Trainers.
Oh, yeah.
I'm still in the police academy and I'm sitting down with this guy getting information. And then like 10 days later, the FBI picked this guy up. So the department kind of recognized that there's something going on here that goes beyond traffic stops and
Well, let's take that incident. Let me rewind a little bit. What was it during your youth, as they say, that when did you know? So at what age, you said you were growing up around these guys? What age were you when you realized you understood what it was? Because you can be around, it's like kids who grew up around those kind of folks. They don't really understand it until you get to a certain point. So when did you know that there was money laundering and dope trafficking going on, in your neighborhood?
I had to be maybe 10 or 11 years of age. It was like one of those. It was like one
How
of
did you
those.
find out?
It was like one of those Hanna-Barbera cartoons where you see the cat and the dog chase each other, and then like all of a sudden the bell rings and they punch a clock. See you tomorrow, Fred. See you tomorrow, Tom. I watched U.S. Marshals and DEA. I don't even know if they're DEA or Bureau of Narcotics back then. I don't know what you guys were called, but I would watch them chase these guys Monday through Friday. Sit next to the bar on Saturday night and then sit in the church pew on Sunday and then do it all over again. I was like 12 years old, 11 years old, 12 or I remember because I was riding my 10-speed bike, and in Florida, you got your driver's license restricted at 15. So I was definitely about 12 or 13 years of age. And I used to see this guy named Adnan Khashoggi. Adnan was one of the biggest arms traffickers in the world at the time. The movie Lord of War is based on him. And he would stand under a sea grape tree in my neighborhood every time he was going to get picked up by a vehicle. He would leave his office and he would stand under the tree. And I would ride by and I would see him stand under the tree, and I would look at him, and he must have known that I knew, because he would kind of like avoid me. And I wasn't going to say or do anything. I was just a kid, but I knew, he's getting picked up. He's getting picked up. I would, where I used to play soccer, we could see from the soccer field what we called corrosion corner of Miami International Airport. And I would see Conair Air and Air America and all these other airlines being loaded up with durable goods going down to Nicaragua. I watched them from the soccer field repaint the numbers on the tail of the airplanes before they loaded them. And so everybody in my neighborhood was a loader or a kicker. They were in the aviation business. A lot of people in my neighborhood were former Korean or Vietnam era pilots, and they're now flying for major airlines, but they missed the adrenaline rush of flying in under the radar, and they didn't care if it was women's shoes from Santo Domingo or ganja from Jamaica. On their time off, they were flying planes in and out of South Florida. There was a local bar in my town that had a bulletin board, and you would go in there and there would be 3x5 cards pinned up that said, I need a navigator who can handle a Constellation, blah, 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 Cessna, blah, blah, blah. Call me tomorrow by 9 a.m. And that's just how it was.
Wow. No kidding. There's that much of an open market.
Yeah. I mean, I lived in Miami Springs, and Miami Springs our zip code was 33166. Back in that time frame, it was the largest zip code for drug importation and cash exportation.
Wow.
I literally grew up on the runway of the airport. I mean, the airport was part of our playground. I mean, we stood on the light towers and had the jets fly over our head as kids.
And see how much of this we would have missed if you just glossed over, said, "Yeah, after I got out of the academy." See, we would have missed all of this
So,
stuff.
these people were in the business, and they weren't nefarious. That's the biggest thing I should say, is that they weren't nefarious. They were a mix of Latins and Anglos, and they had a commonality, and they weren't, if they lost a load or something didn't work out right, they just shrugged their shoulders and said the next one. They didn't have that cutthroat mentality that started to emerge in the mid 80s.
That's, and I know this sounds silly, but everything you're saying, that's why I fell in love with South Florida. It's just exciting. We used to go out and we worked a lot of cases with customs where they would have these informants who had coastal freighters, and they'd go down to Haiti and they'd pick up 300 to 500 kilos of coke, bring it back into the loading docks down there where all the cruise ships come in. We'd meet them at midnight, 2:00 in the morning, whatever it was. We'd unload the dope, take it to a safe location. But in Miami, you had all the bridges had the neon lights underneath them, and and at night, that time of night, you're seeing all these high end cars, and you know who's in those cars. It was just, after watching Miami Vice, man, it's like, wow, this really is Miami Vice, especially for a small town country boy.
In the book that Steve has, Trust No One, I literally say Miami is Eden's evil twin, and it also is where reality comes to rehearse. And it is a very modern day Casablanca.
It really is. I mean, you talk about eclectic. Holy cow! That's if you look up the word in the dictionary, it's got a picture of Miami there.
Yeah, just thinking of Humphrey Bogart too when you said that. Of all the gin joints in the world, you had to pick mine.
Yeah,
I think that was it. But anyway, well, let's talk about that then. So you quickly get into the street units and stuff. What kind of cases are you working as you're starting off? What do they have you doing in these? Tell us about the cases and then what your role is in it.
Well, in the street crime, when we were working in the Gables, we were all in our own car doing our own thing, looking for street crime, street narcotics. We had a small drug trade area in the northwest section of Coconut Grove, which is a neighborhood in Miami. Then when we started working more closely with Miami-Dade County and Miami, we started to branch out and work in their cities. And I remember they put me with the Miami guy, and I'm in the car with him, and this guy is telling me, yeah, over there, see that Burger King? That's where I had my second heart attack, right there. And I'm like, I'm sitting there going, the second heart attack?
dang.
What? And
Maybe stay away from Burger King.
Yeah.
That's a bad commercial for Burger King.
Well, it wasn't a Burger King itself. It was actually a Burger King parking lot he had the heart attack in. But, he was telling me the rigors of the job and what it had done to him. And he was truthfully this super, super burned out individual who actually passed away. And, so we were working, and I was lucky. I got to work with some very talented people. There was a guy in Miami-Dade County named Tom Blake. They called him Bulldog Blake. And he was one of the best burglary detectives ever to come through Miami-Dade. And I got to work with him and his team, and I learned a lot from him. And I got to work with some good people at the city of Miami, and also good people in Coral Gables. And one thing I was very good at was being a student of the game. I was also very good at learning from other people's mistakes and not making those mistakes myself. I took great note in everything, and people would say something to me just in passing, and they would think it didn't stick with me. And then 2 or 3 years later, it would come back and it would be invaluable, so yeah.
That's one of the, in my view, when you're looking at the principles of leadership, everybody's going to make mistakes. So here we got Michael, who is smart enough to see other people making mistakes and learning from it. And I used to tell my folks when they made a mistake, all right, let's get through it. Let's get it corrected. All I ask is you don't make the same mistake again. Because if you do, now we're going to have a problem. So it's fantastic that you're employing that principle of leadership right off the bat and learning from other people's mistakes. That's what we all should be doing.
And the other thing that really helped me a lot is that the friends I had before I was in law enforcement are still the friends I have now. And I stayed very grounded in that sense. I didn't, you wear the badge, don't let the badge wear you. And I always had a philosophy that handshakes go further than handcuffs. And I tried very hard, especially when I was in uniform, to proactively do a lot of community policing. And you have to recognize when you're in law enforcement the difference between a bad guy and a guy having a bad day. And, not everybody has to go to jail. There are people who need to be in jail. There's no doubt about that. I put a lot of them in jail. But sometimes there comes that time when you go, you know what, just don't do it again.
So let's talk about one of the couple of cases, that you're working on, things that impacted you. Like I said, you're watching things go on. Like, was there one or two particular cases while you were in the street crimes unit that still stand out to you today that you worked out, that you look at and you go, either it had a big impact on you or it had an impact because you really felt at some point you made a difference?
I don't think any of us in this conversation are ever going to know the impact we had due to the work we did, because a lot of it's ancillary. There's somebody or something going on right now that was definitely touched by the work you did. You just don't know it. But one of the things that stands out was I had come out of the street crime and I was in uniform. And that's when I had my first shooting. And what happened in that situation was we had some home invaders who a police officer had seen getting into a vehicle. And the female officer, notified on the radio what was happening. And we had a big car chase type environment, and they bailed out and started running. I started chasing this one guy, and it's truthfully, like out of the movies, we're jumping fences, we're going through backyards, we're ducking clotheslines, we're rounding garbage cans. And he came upon a 2-story standalone apartment building that had an external staircase, but the external staircase, was completely concrete, like there was no railing. It was a concrete staircase. And he started to go up the staircase, and I was on the ground coming astride him, and had my weapon drawn and told him to freeze. And he had his back to me, and he was in a low crouch, and he turned really fast. And I saw his hands come up, and it's really strange. I said earlier in the conversation that somebody will say something to you, and it stuck in my head. And what had happened was I remember being on the gun range like 2 years earlier, and the instructor had talked about a backstop, like what happens when the bullet goes through somebody. What's behind that person? What's the backstop? And behind him was a window. And I was concerned that if I shot him, it might go through the window. But at the last second, I could see the webbing of his fingers. As he came up, I saw his fingers like this. And I know it's hard for your audience to hear this, but I saw the gap in his fingers. And I reflexively pulled the gun back, and as I was firing it, and he thought he was shot, and he shuddered and kind of quivered. And then I came around the staircase and grabbed him by the peak of his hair on his forehead, and we came down the stairs, and he got handcuffed. And I was still on probation. I was still like within my year of probation. And I thought, well, this is going to either work or not work in my favor. And after securing him, other officers arrived, and I went to go put him in the patrol car, and I put him in the back seat, and I slammed the door. I was so agitated. I slammed the door, and it caused me to spin. And when I spun, I saw the second guy in the tree right above me, and got him down. So now we had 2 of the 3 or 4. And that was my first shooting, and that was impactful to me because it showed me the investigative legalities of how these cases go. My weapon was taken from me. I was given a second weapon. The shooting team came out. I had to go to internal affairs and explain everything and what happened. And so I saw that whole process. So it was almost like a baptism for me. I got that out of the way, and I was like, okay, I know how this works. I can, if this ever happens again, I can handle this. The biggest thing with me was I was, from start to finish, from the day out of the academy to the day I left, I tried to be a very friendly, affable approachable person. I believe in law enforcement, you should be available, accessible, and approachable. Sitting in a dark tinted window is not making you accessible. Sitting in a parking garage away from the public is not making you available. Being with your arms folded and your mirrored sunglasses on does not make you approachable. You need to be available, accessible, and approachable. But I always went to work each and every day wanting to be the most non-conflictive individual, no conflict, no commotion. But if I had to put you in the ground, I was going to put you in the ground.
And Michael, you talked about something that really resonated with me because name drop, and remember the old law enforcement training network, JD Buck Savage? Did you ever watch that?
No.
So Dave Smith, Arizona Highway Patrol, started doing this thing. It was fun, a training thing called JD Buck Savage, and it was kind of a over-exaggerated cop. It's like he'd be doing surveillance, and it just, as I was in my mobile crime fighting platform, but to this day, Dave does a lot of training, him and his wife, Betsy Brantner Smith. One of the funny things was one of the lines of JD Buck Savage is, watch the hands, always watch the hands. And I was doing the same thing. I was in an unmarked car as a police officer, doing some selective patrol in areas where we had a lot of high crime. And I see this kid, and I'm backed away, and I see this kid walking across. Now I'm in uniform, sitting in an unmarked car, but the folks that I'm looking at can't see me. But this kid does, crossing the street, and he's a member of our local crime family. And he does that thing. He kind of walks by me, pats his, waistband like he's got a gun. And then he walks by and I'm like, what the hell's going on? So I open up the door, you start to get ready. And I see him unzip his jacket. And then his hand goes in like this. And then he starts to turn around real fast. Well, fortunately, there's like a street light there. And what do? That's thing pop in, watch the hands. Just to your point, you watch the hands. I was probably about a half an ounce away from dropping the hammer on this kid. But all he had was a finger gun. And I think he was just trying to do that and I'll tell you what, like you, I didn't have anybody hiding up in the tree, but I was so fucking mad after that. I mean, personally mad because you go, number one, I almost shot somebody who was unarmed. Number two, it just made me mad because he put me in that position. And it's like, I think I think I bent the door frame, when I got out, but I tried to charge him with terroristic threat and they said, couldn't charge him. I said, do you know how close? I think it would have been good based upon everything, how fast it was going. But still, can you imagine living with that, shooting an unarmed person? And then in a community, he was Hispanic. Our city was about 40% Hispanic. That just would have been the end of everything for him, obviously, and for me.
One thing I saw the transcripts after it was all done, and the internal affairs investigator asked the subject, when the officer told you to stop, what did you do? He goes, I turned and jumped at him. And they said, why'd you do that? And he goes, I just wanted to. And, he put himself in harm's way. And the IA investigator said, you're lucky because his reactions he's so young, his reactions, he was able to, simultaneously pull the trigger, yet also pull the gun away. And the Glock, it was a Glock 9mm at the time. And it didn't cycle. Because I limp wristed it so fast. I pulled it so fast that the slide didn't cycle. So the shooting team spent like an hour looking for the shell casing that was in the weapon the whole time. It never ejected.
How about that? You're muted, Morgan.
Sorry. Yes, I am muted. I'm not muted anymore.
I need one of those mute buttons for you. That's what I need.
Well, you're going to have to pay. You're going to have to pay for that, pal. That is unusual too. I've got a Glock 23. I've never had that happen. I mean, it's weird, things that happen because normally Glocks are pretty reliable. You pull the trigger,
durable.
They shoot. You pull the trigger, they shoot. Yeah.
Idiot proof. That's why law enforcement uses them.
Yeah. Any semi-automatic, if you don't have that wrist locked, you're going to have that issue, the limp wrist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what was the final outcome on that? I mean, you've got a discharge of a weapon, obviously guy unarmed, but I think it looks like all the conditions are there for it to be a legitimate use of force.
Yeah, justifiable shooting. When they got to the vehicle that they bailed out of, they found 3 Miami-Dade raid jackets, 2 Miami-Dade badges. They found 3 handguns and 6 holsters. So the one guy I chased had dropped the gun on the run when I was chasing him. He was armed.
Stolen? These raid jackets and everything?
They had broken into a Miami-Dade police officer's car and taken a bunch of stuff out of his car. At least one badge, maybe not two, but the main thing was they took all of his stuff, and they were home invaders, and he was armed when I was chasing him. I did not know that at the time. And he, somewhere on the run, as we went through fences and clotheslines and backyards, dropped the weapon. The canine found the weapon. And so we knew we had guns out there because they had announced on the radio when they bailed out that we have, 6 holsters and only 3 guns.
And the guns that were recovered, were they all stolen cop guns too?
Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
That's
Holy cow.
We had some burglaries in our neighborhood. Very rare. We're in a really nice area, but years and years ago, Virginia State police investigator up there got his car broken into. And that was the thing. I don't know why he left his weapon in there unsecured, but he did. And, we had a detective, do the same thing. He always took his gun off, stuck it under his seat. And it was all hands on deck. You don't want that gun. Last thing in the world you want is that gun being used, in a shooting.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you get cleared on that. So, but where do you go after that? Because you start working into, obviously you start getting into bigger and bigger cases. So start telling us, how does it progress from there for you? When do you start getting involved in bigger level cases and cartel stuff and the money laundering and the trafficking?
Well, the biggest thing was we had a drug trafficking area in the city of Coral Gables. Mostly it was crack cocaine in the north section of Coconut Grove, a neighborhood in Miami. And the crack dealers were dealing out of a physical structure that had lots of open fields around it. Not anymore. It's all built up now. So they would always see law enforcement coming in, and they'd either run, hide the stuff, drop the stuff, whatever it may be. So that was my sector when I got hired. The south part of Coconut Grove was my sector, which was predominantly African American. And the first thing I did from day one is I just pulled up in front of the place where they sell the crack cocaine, and I didn't hassle anybody. I didn't ask for ID. I didn't chase anybody. I didn't do any of that. I just sat there and read the Miami Herald. But what I did was I took the buyer out of the equation. And the crack cocaine is no good if they can't sell it. And every day I just took the buyer out of the equation, and I basically drove them out. And so the department realized that, they came to me and said, how are you doing this? And I said, because the drugs don't have any meaning if they can't be converted into a monetary instrument. They can't be made into money. So the focus became on, we're never going to stop cocaine because it basically grows off a bush. You seize a couple kilograms of cocaine, it will just go back, pull more leaves off the bush, put them in the poso pit, process them, and make more cocaine. But if we take the money out of the equation, money doesn't grow on trees, unfortunately. And so with that mindset, I got sent over to Operation Greenback at U.S. Customs. And then myself and 3 other partners eventually became part of a local task force working with the Greenback customs agents and our DEA liaison that I mentioned earlier. And we hit an incredible home run right out of the gate. We seized $24 million. At the time, it was the largest cash seizure in law enforcement. And that was over like a 5-month period, and of which we were the only local agency attached to that. And
was that out of a single seizure or a combination of seizures that you got?
Combination of seizures. What we did, we had to let some money walk, but we were able to seize 4 million. 2.5 million of it was like in New York City, and the rest was in Miami. And we had a really good stable of informants at Customs. And this was in 1990. And so, with the success of that and the amount of income and revenue and resources it brought to the agency, they were like, full steam ahead. You 4 stay at, now you're vice narcotics. You're no longer, street crime group, and that's where I was for 10 years.
And how were they taking the money? Because you talked about With customs, did you have some asset forfeiture where you could get some of that money to come back and fund the unit and fund your activities and equipment?
Yeah, what happens, and Steve will probably agree with me, is that when you are a federal um, agency, you're allocated X amount of dollars per your annual budget. And if you were to have a large cash seizure come your way, it's going to give you a surplus. And next year after that, Washington's going to say, hey, you guys have way too much money and they'll cut your budget.
Baseline budgeting, they cut it right
And
back
you
to work.
know that money is not always a guarantee. So the guys at Customs were happy to get the statistical data, the arrests, the indictments, the cases, and they were happy to send the cash back to us as endowment. So we either took it as proceeds from the seizure, or Customs oftentimes would put it in their account and then very quickly purchase things to us as a gift or an endowment back to us. That's how we kind of worked the law enforcement trust fund.
An early form of legal money laundering.
You're an abandoned property specialist.
It's a shell game is what it is.
That was always a fun part too about when you do seizures. And it worked both ways too. As the state level, when I was in Kansas, we'd get a seizure. The feds would adopt it. They would take 10%, 90% would come back to us. If we tried to do it through the state, convoluted, everybody wanted to put their fingers into it.
Yeah.
And it was always nice doing it. By the way, too, that's the other thing too, feds liked about state and local. Murph, if you had your choice between you writing a Title III or going through the state?
Oh, geez, the state every time. It's like writing an instruction manual versus War and Peace.
Yeah. At the time, I had a very good assistant chief of police, a very good lieutenant, a very good sergeant, and they were really proactive about the work we were doing, and they were supportive of what we were doing. And the very first seizure we ever had was $240,000. And I remember that almost everyone who had a gold badge showed up to look at it. It was like a show and tell. They all came out.
Amazing, isn't it?
Ooh. And then I remember literally a year later coming in with 800,000 and having some go. Is that it? That's all you got? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's old hat then.
Because we were averaging 800,000 a month for almost 10 years straight.
Yeah, we did a lot of work because I was in Group 10 there in Miami, and we did a lot of work with a retired police officer now, Rick Rogers, with South Miami PD. And when we were making those cash seizures, they got the lion's share because they were the only local agency, unless we did some takedown. And then if we need Miami-Dade or Metro-Dade or Miami PD or whoever, you'd cut them in for 10%. But this little South Miami PD bringing in hundreds of thousands of dollars, when you call and ask for something, they go buy it for you. It was amazing,
Yeah, well, we brought in so much money at one time that the powers that be, Miami-Dade was like, hey, wait a minute, this is happening in our county. We want our guys in there. And so over time, our group of 4 local guys working closely with DEA and Customs expanded, and it got a little unwieldy towards the end.
Yeah. Yeah, everybody wants on board.
Well, let me ask you a question about that too. I never had a seizure that large. The largest one I ever got was $225,000 out of the trunk of a car. But the funny part is, just like you were saying, the funny part is, that's the funny part about cops. You get really good cops. It's all about the trophy picture. Not once did it cross my mind. I mean, for what I was making back then, $225,000, I could have lived on that, for 10 years, easy, right? But that wasn't the thought that went through your head. It was like, damn, look at this. It's a trophy shot. You wanted to take pictures. It was bragging rights, at the bar. And so when you saw that first big pile of money, did it affect you at all? I mean, in that way, or when you looked at it, how did it affect you?
You're looking at a stack of hundreds and you're saying to yourself, this is my entire mortgage. And at first you see the value equation of it all. And then after a while, it's just like you're counting rocks. You can't have it. You can't touch it. It's not yours. It's just like counting rocks. And counting money, as Steve will tell you, is a filthy, dirty business. I mean, a lot of gunk and fiber and human oils and stuff come off that
nasty
money. Yeah. Money's dirty. It really is. I mean, even air quote clean money is physically dirty when you think about all the hands that touch it. And, you're finding it in bags and suitcases and attics and crawl spaces, and it's got mothballs with it sometimes. And it's just, at first, once again, not that it's a temptation. It's more of
Fascination.
not even a fascination. It's just a an incredulous mentality. But I was briefly primed about that because of the guys I grew up with would tell me, hey, so and so's got money on pallets. He's got 4 people count money full time for him. So I'd heard about these things. I'd never seen it. Now I was seeing it. So it's kind of like hearing about a lion and then going to the zoo and seeing one for the first time. You're going, oh yeah, I know what that is. I've seen it. I've heard about it. Now I've seen it. The money thing, it got it became it became bothersome 6, 7, 8 years later because we started having like these steering committee task forces and things. And like I can remember we had one case where these guys were going to home invade a house and torture the wife and young child of this guy before they asked where the money was. And so we set up a sting with our CI to take them off before they got to the house. And we successfully did that. And one of the people from the steering committee, one of the majors, captains, chiefs, was like, well, we didn't get any money out of it. And at that point, I was like, we're losing our way. We're losing our way here. And the money became voluminous and big and fast. And it came in a lot.
Yeah, he was forgetting all about public safety.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a good point you brought up about when you've got that much. The biggest seizure I ever made cash wise was 1.3 million there in Miami. And, I'm a country kid. I've never seen that kind of cash. And I'm the same way. You're never tempted. And if you are tempted, that's a clue right there that you need to go find a different occupation because eventually you're going to try and, let me just take, a couple $100 here. And you do. And then, that was easy. Nobody caught on. And it just builds and builds. So if that is a temptation, you need to go find another job because you're getting ready to compromise your integrity.
Yeah. My biggest one-time out of the gate seizure was 6.8 million in one fell swoop. The 22 was a accumulation of 4 or 5 months of pickups and drops. But the one out of a house by myself, me, myself, and my team was 6.8 million. And
Nice.
At the time, I want to say Nicholas Brady. I don't know who the U.S. Treasurer was at the time, but he was in Miami on a fact finding mission. So they brought him out. The guy whose signature was on the money was looking at the money.
Wow.
We have evidence you're involved in this crime, Mr. Secretary. Look, your name's all over it.
Yeah, exactly.
You're an unindicted co-conspirator. Hey, let me ask you a corollary to that. We talked about the temptation. How did you manage the issue of that? Because look, cops, a lot, as we know too, a lot of good cops. And Murph and I say nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop. Mm-hmm. But we know down in Miami, stuff has happened. We know it's happened everywhere, right? So how did you guard against and what steps did you take to prevent not only the temptation for corruption, but when corruption happened, how did you guys handle that?
Almost every year I was in the task force, someone in I won't say my group, I'll say someone in this system. It could be, he said before, DEA Group 10, DEA Group 6, could be U.S. Customs, could be a South Miami guy, could be whoever it was. Somebody either committed suicide or went to jail.
Mm.
The temptation is real. Not to quote Glenn Fry, but I will. The lure of easy money has got a very strong appeal. And you don't know what's going on in people's lives, how they're vexed or challenged or what's going on with them. We created strong safeguards. When we made a seizure, we would be on the scene with the currency, and then we would call for an intake team. And then that team would come in, and the currency would be placed in one guy's trunk, and then in a locked, like hockey bag. We had like a hockey bag, and we put whatever the doper's money was in. Like I say, it was a big Adidas bag. We'd put that Adidas bag in this hockey size bag, hockey gear bag, padlock it, And one guy would have the key, but the other guy would drive it back. And then two separate guys would follow them back to the money counting area or room. We had a designated money counting place. And then from there, we had a sign-in sheet, and we put crime scene tape up over the door. You couldn't come in unless you were on the sheet, regardless of what your rank was. If you weren't on that sheet, you couldn't come in the room. And then from there, the same team would take it straight to the bank or to the vault until we took it to the bank. So we put in as many safeguards as we could to stop that. The big corruption comes in when the officers start to become incredibly friendly with their CIs, and they start to view the CIs as more of an ally to them than their team. And we saw that a few times where, some guys telling the CI, yo, bro, you're like a brother to me, man. No, you're a tool. Okay, let's get this straight.
If he's snitching on somebody today, he'll snitch on you tomorrow.
Oh, there's no loyalty, there's no allegiance in this world, and especially in the drug world, there's no loyalty or no allegiance. I after that $22 million seizure, the Medellin cartel put a contract on me and my immediate partner. And the reason why was because our name was on a lot of the paperwork. And you talked earlier about the glory shots. I see now on Facebook and other social media outlets, people putting up pictures. Hey, remember this 30 years ago? Hey, remember this 25 years ago? You don't ever see me in those pictures because I didn't want to be in those shots. And I had to be in the shot for the 22 million because they made quite a large dog and pony show out of it. And all of us were in that picture, but I didn't take the glory shots. I didn't have my picture taken with kilos and have my picture taken with money. I kept a very low profile. I only went on social media like 2 years ago because I was trying to promote some of the work I've done post retirement. But for the by and large, I've tried to stay under the radar as much as I could up until recently.
Let me ask you a question about, you said there were some guys that committed suicide and some guys that went to jail. Of the ones that committed suicide, was it because of the stress of the job, or was it because they faced the prospect of going to jail?
Faced the prospect of going to jail.
What was when some of the, I don't want to get into details because I don't want to expose people's names, but just if you kind of like gave a thumbnail sketch of like one of the cases that involved somebody going to jail. How did that information come about? Was it from like things like internal audits or a CI saying something, or another law enforcement source? How would most of these cases get started?
I don't want to tiptoe around your question, but you basically hit on all 3 or 4 methods of how these things came to light. Sometimes it was a CI said something. Sometimes there was an irregularity in what we were seeing. Sometimes there was something that came up on like another wire from another agency that might say, hey, who's this guy? Because he just got mentioned. So, Steve knows.
I mean, that had to be tough too. I mean, watching one of your own people. It
was very tough. I mean, one of the things I try to tell people, and I will, say this both to you, Steve, and to you, Morgan, is the 3 of us, as well as our compadres, we learned to live and thrive in that environment. But the biggest thing is we learned how to exit it. We learned how to get out of it and move on, put it in perspective and put it as a chapter of our lives. And that's the biggest thing is it's okay to be good at what you do, but you got to know when it's time to leave too. And I had some very difficult times in the undercover days. I don't know. I'm reluctant to say names and places, but Steve knows.
We don't need names. Yeah,
I was there, Steve, the night that one of your agents shot another agent in a drunken stupor and killed him.
Oh, geez. I remember that.
Yeah.
That was already gone from Miami by then.
I was there, and the agent that got killed, I trained. He had come from another field office and knew nothing about Miami or money laundering, and he sat with me for 6 days straight, and I trained him in what we were doing, and he was on my team. And the other agent was, he bounced between 2 or 3 of our teams. And it was after a holiday party. Very sad time.
I'll give you one other example. And DEA is not perfect. We had an agent who was a very good friend of mine who worked considerable undercover. He was Cuban American. His wife was an agent. He was, I don't want to, he's still living, so I don't want to say something here that I would get sued over, but he got transferred back to South Florida as a group supervisor, and his group was doing money pickups. And he had become so confident in his undercover abilities that he went and did a money pickup by himself. Well, what do you do if you got $700,000, $800,000, $1 million? What do you do with it? So he walked into the bank, he badged them and said, "I need to have this counted," and then, deposit into his personal account. Well, it just so happened there was an IRS agent, or an IRS, I don't know if he's an agent, but an IRS representative at the bank that day. And the teller went to the manager went to the IRS, and they're like, "This just doesn't sound right, because this DEA never does it this way." And so they started an investigation. He ended up going to prison, which is where he should have been, because he stepped over that thin blue line to the bad side. Lost his career. His wife lost her career. Now he's a convicted criminal, convicted felon. It was horrible. And he was involved in one of the highest profile cases that DEA has ever participated in. And I'm just not going to say it because I don't want to get sued over it.
Yeah, it's funny because in a movie that came out in the early 1980s, Extreme Prejudice, the drug
Nick
trafficker,
Nolte. Yeah,
says to Nick Nolte, "Why don't you just come work with me?" And Nick Nolte says, "You can buy me. You could always buy me, but you can't buy the badge. And one without the other ain't no damn good."
Hey players, that is the end of part 1. Part 2 comes out, as always, on Tuesday. In the meantime, go check us out at Game of Crimes on Twitter, at Game of Crimes Podcast on Facebook and the Instagram. Also, go check out our website, gameofcrimespodcast.com. We've got a lot more information there, including our book list. Any book written by our guests will be listed there. In the meantime, go check us out also, patreon.com/Game of Crimes. It's where we put a lot more content you won't hear on our regular podcast. We go into a lot more topics, and folks, it is a lot of fun. So go check us out, patreon.com/Game of Crimes. In the meantime, everybody stay safe. We'll see you tomorrow for part 2.